guys, and welcome back to the next interesting conversation episode on the TCC podcast. We have not chatted with you guys in quite a while. To my right, I have the Mr. Pedantic.
Well, I think technically I'm across from you. I'm not to your right. The wall would be to your right and to my left.
See, he's just being the freaking Mr. Pedantic right now.
You know, a name carries some meaning. So
That's true.
It has to carry through.
It's incredible. You just cannot get it out of him. No matter what you do, you're stuck with that.
You're going to appreciate it when you taste this coffee today. So
Most definitely. And so maybe tell us a bit about the coffee.
all right. Well, I have to say this is one of my favorite coffees to make. It is by far one of the coffees that I spent the most time on, as well as...
Well, literally.
Yeah, as well as I think one of the coffees that we've tasted the most consecutively. So
Most definitely.
This would be a red Pacamara, AB, grown in the HueHuetenango Valley, in the shadow of the HueHuetenango volcano on the La Hermosa farm in Guatemala.
Now, guys, just for a second there, appreciate the pedanticness coming through. Man, I've missed that.
But and I think what made this coffee so interesting was the fact that the Rodriguez family put it through a red honey process, and then how the roaster decided to caramelize the sugar on this specific coffee.
And man, getting
Getting that level of caramelization on a roast that was so light, getting us those beautiful, that grape and blueberry sweetness, that citrus fruit acidity,
Right.
that grapefruit bitterness, and that beautiful pinotage umami in the center of the tongue.
Exactly. It's
So
this beautiful golden syrup caramelization, which is only roughly about 53 to 54 seconds after first crack.
And if you didn't understand what the coffee was, I remember the first time you showed this to me, and I told you, this is way too dark to do anything with it. Like, there's no way we can use a medium dark roast coffee.
You were like, bro, this stuff is burnt.
No, but how do you use a medium dark roast coffee that was put through, to bring out such complexity, and actually being confronted for the first time with
Roast color.
with the difference between the traditional roast profile versus actually caramelization and development.
Exactly, yeah. Because
That-
the bean is basically developed anything between a 16 and an 18.5%, but with this caramelization of a medium to medium dark roast.
Yeah.
It's melted sugar with this molasses type of color to it, for those of you that can't see it, but at the same time, that beautiful, bright, spunky, funky, light roast profiles just hanging in the middle of that bean waiting to be pulled out.
Now, we are at a point in the extraction that I can actually ask us, are we making this for your palate or for mine?
Well, let's go for my palate, just because I haven't had this coffee in such a long time with you extracting it to that element. Now, just to kind of get into a bit of the geeky side of the coffee.
Yeah.
It was grown at roughly 1,900 to 2,100 meters above sea level. It was handpicked with a fairly high bricks content. So the content of the bricks was anything between a 20 and a 23 bricks. So it's this huge, beautiful, almost like maroonish, wineish type of red color, like beautiful, beautiful sugars. And then, of course, they take that through all of the flotation, like sorting it out, getting it nice and clean. And then, of course, the big one, pulping that thing dry to make sure that we don't get any of that sugar washed off.
Yeah.
Goes into the fermentation tanks. I think this one was fermented 2 days, if I remember correctly.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it was 2 days.
Yeah, 2 days. So roughly about 39 to about 48 hours. I'm talking under, correction there. Purely because I have not seen the information of this coffee in so long.
Yeah,
it's literally the
been a
last
while.
batch that we have available on roast. It is a fairly old, and yes, I'm going to say this, fairly old
Harvest.
green, so
Yeah.
harvest-wise, but it is exactly
Yes.
2 weeks old as roast. It's still very, very fresh, 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's 2.5 weeks.
Yes.
But beautiful, beautiful aromas from the coffee.
Oh, some gorgeous grapes there. Or as our roaster would say, rotten fruits.
I can't believe, and this
Every
is
single time, man.
And this is something that we do fight over because a rotten fruit and a fermented fruit is not the same
thing, man.
We use fermented fruit to create beautiful creations. You throw rotten fruit away.
Right. I mean, rotten fruit, you kind of see the flies and you think to yourself, oh, maybe I can get that one grape out. You pop it in your mouth and it's this soft, gooey, weird, rotten flavor, which is not fermented.
That's not great, but I will tell you, the worst experience I've ever had with a fruit that surprised me with regards to its fermentation level was a cocktail tomato. And
I'm not going to have that experience.
It was the grossest thing
really?
that I ever... And the worst thing was, like, it literally popped.
Sour or sweet?
No. Like,
astringent.
Just plain rotten. I didn't take time to analyze
so
flavor.
One of those that pop and then it just like
literally
squeals out the side of your mouth.
It's just like completely popped. So horrible flavor.
That's disgusting.
But we're not really here to talk about tomatoes
or anything rotten.
Yes, anything rotten.
Yeah. So, well, today's topic, of course, very interesting and a great coffee to actually go into that topic.
Yeah, it's a good segue into what we want to discuss.
Most definitely is associating with actual flavor. Because what we've noticed is so many people, you go into these shops, you buy this very expensive packet of coffee, and on the coffee packet it says blueberries, grapefruit, and rotten grapes. And you go to yourself, huh? So you brew the coffee, you take a sip at it, and you go, I do not taste any of those flavor notes.
Yeah.
So today we want to discuss and give you some insight into how we associate with those flavors, not taste those flavors.
Because if you think about it, a lot of people, how many products do we find on the market that taste like coffee? Right? Well, everything's coffee flavored liqueur, coffee flavored
tea,
muffins, and
desserts.
But now we get coffee that tastes like grapes, or you have coffee that tastes like chocolate, but you have chocolate that tastes like coffee. So where
that's a bad association.
Like where do we find the balance in associating a flavor, identifying it, and also, because we have relatively sharp palates.
Right.
I think we're not completely incompetent in extracting a coffee, this cup proving it.
Right. And I've not tasted it yet.
Well, you're missing out.
I think I should just go for it, okay?
It's not hot enough to burn you, all right?
Thank you.
So, but one of the challenges is we go and we extract a coffee and we're not getting the flavor that they say we're supposed to get. Beautiful flavor, right?
Oh. That one's running down my throat. It's just like doing the nice little jazz dance going down,
That is one of the best compliments. Like, I have said this before. One of the best compliments you get on a cup of coffee is a reaction like this. Going and seeing that facial expression.
Round, smooth, creamy, sizzling with this pop of almost like a champagne in the back corners of my mouth.
I haven't tasted champagne yet, but I do know what sparkling wine tastes like.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a thing here in South Africa. We only really get to experience sparkly wines.
Yeah.
A proper champagne. The other night I saw very nice champagne, but not to go into champagnes.
Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting flavor notes right there, which could bring us straight to, obviously starting to analyze it. So the first thing that we look at when we taste a coffee to associate the flavor basically comes down to three very, very simple things.
Yeah.
The three things is, and of course all of that happens on your tongue, but the three things is sweetness, which we mostly, very vividly taste on the tip of the tongue.
Yeah.
The acidity, which most people associate with something bitter. So I always like to make the joke when tasting coffee, people go, and you can see on their face they're going, what the heck is this? And so I would say, right, at this point, everybody goes, this thing is bitter. And then they go, yeah. I'm like, right, is it bitter on the side of the tongue or is it bitter in the throat?
Yeah.
And they all go, no, it's not on the side of the tongue. And I'm like, right, that's called
acidity.
Acidity.
But now also, a lot of the clients that we encounter are Afrikaans.
Right.
And in the Afrikaans language, we don't have two words to describe sour and acidic.
Right. It's the same thing for us.
Yes. And I feel like I encounter that more with South African people. I feel like people that we've made coffee for from different countries don't have the issue of
defining between the two.
misassociation between bitterness and acidity.
They very easily think it's bitter, but once you say acidic, they go, oh, yeah. And then they give an association like, balsamic vinegar or, lime or
a fresh
lemon
strawberry.
skin or fresh strawberry. And they go, oh, so that's not called bitterness. So that overwhelming feeling is actually supposed to be nice. I'm like, yes, you're drinking an acidic beverage. Of course it's supposed to be acidic. No, I'm going to make you coffee with no acidity inside.
Well, we recently had a coffee that we tried to extract all of the acidity out of. Yeah. And even though it was a really good coffee.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Ethiopia only grows good coffee. Let's be honest.
We missed that acidic element that we get to enjoy.
It was not there.
Yeah.
And we would even go hotter, more like tighter ratios, and still boring. Beautiful sweetness, beautiful, finish,
and
long
flavor
lingering.
complexity.
Oh, very complex in flavor, but boring in acidity.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've got, the final element, the third one of the three, which is, of course, bitterness.
Yeah.
An actual woody or chocolatey or roasty type of flavor that literally lingers down your throat. That would be the three basic elements to start with before you want to try and associate with different flavors. Like, very easy to go, oh, this thing is bitter. And then I go, oh, like lemon skin. Yeah, and then you think to yourself, but bitter, like lemon skin is not really bitter. So how do you associate bitter? Well, it doesn't taste like charcoal.
Well, no. It doesn't taste like charcoal, but it does have that sharp acidity. If you think about something like orange marmalade or something.
Right.
So an orange being acidic and sweet primarily, but the skin being extremely bitter. It's got that
like
sharp,
that zestiness.
almost astringent kind of acidity, a bitterness to it.
But interesting, that stops just before it goes down your throat. That's kind of your mouth sensation.
Well,
the moment it goes into the throat, for me, it's like charcoal or smoke, like inhaling smoke, standing around a braai or
my tongue
whatever.
doesn't go all the way back to my throat, so I haven't
Mine
that
goes
experience.
really. I'm gonna, no. Yeah, so association basically starts right there.
Yeah.
And so whenever I would say, like for instance on this coffee,
Yeah.
if we give that a little good slurpity slurp without trying to kill you guys in the mic, I'm going to kind of focus on the tip of the tongue. Really sharp, spunky, funky, exciting sweetness.
And what a texture to accompany the sweetness.
A beautiful, almost like this dry pinotage, but yet creamy.
But Red Globe grapes. A Red Globe grape has that dry tannin element to it with that muddled but intense sweetness to it.
Right.
Yes.
Very maple syrupy like. It's not overwhelmingly sweet that it burns you, but at the same time, you really, really appreciate that gorgeous sweetness.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the acidity. Acidity in this one, through and through, I'm going to stick with our roaster.
Yeah.
Rotten grapes. Having this really, really
not
dark purple, it's been laying in the fridge for a few days too long. You take it out, it's not off yet.
Yeah.
But it's got this dry, rotty grape.
Yeah.
Very winey. Now, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. I mean, wine is delicious, and that's kind of like
also
grapes.
if that's your palate.
Right, of course.
But I feel like it's more, we've got a lot of that citrus element, that kind of
Orange.
sharpish orange.
Right, zestiness
Zesty
popping through in the
acidity
background
to
as
it.
well. Yes.
And definitely that grapefruit. Like that
no,
signature
going down the throat.
ruby grapefruit bitterness there at the back.
Now, that's a perfect association with the bitterness.
Yeah.
Now, when we say bitter, we don't associate only the smoky because, unfortunately, and I think this is really sad, especially in the coffee industry, with in competitions and judging and having a bunch of professionals around the table, we would all say, "Ooh, this is a grapefruit bitterness."
Yeah.
And people go, "Grapefruit bitterness? Like, how can you say something citrus is bitter?" And we go, "Okay, well, the definition in bitterness, unfortunately, is not the norm of like sweetness on a 1 out of 10 sweetness, there's obviously 0 sweetness.
Yeah.
Like it's like just drinking plain water. But then you get the element on the other side, a 10 out of 10 sweetness.
Yeah.
That's like having molasses and golden syrup mixed together. You're putting this thing in your mouth that really like burns the gums, and like it's really, really sweet.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in bitterness, you get 2 specks of bitter.
Yeah.
You get a 1 out of 10 bitterness, which has 0 bitterness. That means you're not tasting anything bitter.
Yeah.
Then you get your 5 out of 10 bitterness, which I know Mr. Christian loves. It's that element, it's that element of balance, that gorgeous type of soya sauce. You're going into your chocolate elements towards, cacao,
but
something
I feel
like that.
I'd rather go low on sweetness than acidity and low on bitterness to find that balance. Anything up to a 5 is almost too intense, too much chocolate. As much as I enjoy balance, I do enjoy the complexity and the acidity of a coffee.
Yes. But I mean, my palate versus your palate.
Yeah, no, it's not the same.
I ain't a number 5 guy.
But you ain't a number 3 guy.
Right. I'm like a number 2, max 2.5 kind of guy.
Oh, ristretto.
Right, like 0 bitterness. I want no chocolate in my coffee. I want acidity for days. But then, of course, you get your 6 out of 10 bitterness, which is kind of where you get the cocoa, but it's almost like it started burning.
Yeah.
So you made a chocolate cake and it went, in the oven for just a tad too long.
But also, I think if you take a look at, our demographic and the people that we meet the most, the association on bitterness itself is not good. Right?
At all, yes.
The moment something's not, somebody describes something as bitter, they say, oh, that's bitter, that's not nice.
Right.
Whereas the moment you deal with somebody who's in the food industry or who has to do with tasting, they describe the importance of bitterness.
Right.
Because
it creates balance.
Bitterness is necessary for balance.
Right.
If you only have sweet and acidic, we lack that balance element,
Finish,
or
the linger,
that rounded element that a meal brings.
Yes.
If you think about something like rocket, right? Rocket,
very good example.
spicy, and then the difference between normal rocket and wild rocket, whereas the one has a sharper bitter element while retaining freshness, and the other one has more of a umami element, a much smoother, flat, but still slightly fresh and crisp element of flavor.
Right.
And then if we take a look at coffee, now you buy yourself a packet, right? And we had a coffee that we tasted that was like this.
Right.
Watermelon as a flavor note.
Oh, you remember that one.
Now I pull the coffee. I put all the knowledge, all the experience, everything that I think this coffee has to offer, looking at roast profile, green bean, everything that the coffee could potentially give.
The processing, everything, yes.
And
you chose a phenomenal ratio, brilliant extraction. It was a great cup.
Brilliant flavor, but not watermelon.
0 watermelon in that thing.
Like 100% stone fruit flavors.
Right.
The opposite direction.
Nectarines.
No watermelon.
Apricots.
But a lot more experience in extracting coffee and understanding
the molecules,
how the roaster prepares his coffee.
Right.
So how they believe the coffee should be prepared. We go for us, unorthodox region with recipe, how we make the coffee. We pull very quickly on a long ratio, and immediately I think to myself, this is not going to be good. This is going to be really, really bad, and it's going to be like really bad toilet water. And you nail the watermelon flavor 100%.
Except the roaster was like, this is the watermelon I got in the cupping, except 3 times sweeter. And the only reason was, instead of the norm out there, his extraction on a 1:16 ratio, I went slightly tighter, 1:14 ratio.
Okay.
But I really got the watermelon extracted out of the coffee really quick.
Yeah.
And then I put the sweetness in the background, which made it a very sweeter watermelon versus your extremely sweet, beautiful balanced stone fruits.
Yeah.
Same coffee, 2 different extractions, completely different flavor notes.
And I think when you then buy a cup of coffee or when you buy a packet of coffee and you look at flavor notes, one of the things, if you have the opportunity, that is very important, is chatting with the roaster. Finding out.
Yes.
How did you intend for this coffee to be prepared?
Yes.
Because they tell you it's going to taste like mango, it's going to taste like Earl Grey. Not that I know why you'd buy coffee that tastes like tea, but, you know,
True.
You find what they intended for the coffee to taste like and
Their preferred ratio.
Yes.
Important.
Which now we can identify, okay, I do this ratio, I do this with the recipe, and now I get the flavor notes that the roaster intended. Does that mean that it's going to be for my palate? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, yes. Well, I mean, I'm not a watermelon kind of guy.
Well, neither am I.
Purely for the fact I'm actually allergic to watermelon. Don't know why. Like, if you're scientific out there and you understand, let me know. But more than that, I'm not into watermelon that much.
Yeah.
Yet, you want more.
Yes, I want more.
Yet, I had a very big appreciation for the watermelon that I tasted in that coffee,
Yeah.
even though I didn't like it. So you can still
Yes.
appreciate, you know, you can appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily have to like it.
But I don't think that enjoyment and appreciation is necessarily the same thing.
100% agree.
I buy you a pair of funky socks. You appreciate.
He likes his socks.
You appreciate, and I like socks.
Very
but
much so.
He doesn't because he wears.
couldn't care.
I mean, you wear specific kinds of socks, right?
Right.
But you would appreciate the fact
That you did the
that
effort.
I
Yes.
saw a pair of socks that reminded me of you,
Right.
and decided to spend money that I work hard for on that pair of socks. Does
Exactly.
it mean that you're going to like them? Not necessarily, but you appreciate,
Very much.
you know, the thought and the process.
I'm going to keep them. I don't know how often I'm going to wear them.
Well, Jonathan might steal them, but
My son will definitely take them. But I will definitely have the appreciation for them,
Yeah.
yes. I'm not going to know what they feel like every single day.
the double wall coffee glasses.
Right,
There's the
that's a
perfect
great example.
Right? Way too the coffee is way too hot when you have to drink
I
it.
cannot drink from the double-walled glasses. Man, that stuff keeps heat for days.
Definitely.
Like, I can wait a half an hour and it still burns my mouth.
Yeah.
Where, you know, it doesn't mean I'm going to give them away. In my studio, they're
Yeah.
in so many different videos, but I have to wait a half an hour before I put it into the cup just so I can drink from the cup. So that's a very good example.
Yeah.
So when we look at flavor notes written on something as simple as the packet or the box. Now, someone who does really, really good job at this is, of course, Father Coffee.
Yeah.
They have on every single box a suggested ratio and specific flavors and even other type of flavors when you mix it with milk into a
Yeah.
cortado, a flat white, or a cappuccino, which I really appreciate the fact that they go that far.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of effort, a lot of thought that you can see that the roaster put behind their product, anticipating what a client could use it for. And what I appreciate is the moment somebody says flat white on the packet, you can automatically assume that they would recommend this is not a cappuccino coffee, it's
Exactly.
a flat white coffee.
Right.
So it's already a recommendation on how you can approach this.
Which means don't go home with that box. Throw it through your machine and make a normal cappuccino and expect to get the same flavor association as they do.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't intended for a cafe latte.
Yeah.
It was intended for a flat white.
Yeah.
So now, to get to the actual association is think of watermelon. Let's use that coffee, for example.
Yeah.
When I think of watermelon,
Yeah.
now, how do you experience watermelon? You take a bite of it, and of course, like
Yeah.
me, you're not a big fan, so
Yeah.
I think it's a good example.
Well, if I have to close my eyes and take a bite of this imaginary watermelon, first thing that hits me is that extremely intense sweetness,
Interesting.
a slight acidic element to it. I would say like maybe a 3 out of 10 acidity on the side of the tongue.
Okay.
That like 7 out of 10 umami element. But I think
Interesting.
a lot of texture contributing to the sensation
So much.
associated with umami.
Yeah.
And then very little bitterness. I feel like the closer you get to the skin, the
Yeah,
more
that
bitter.
white element kind of carries that grassy type of bitterness.
Yeah.
Which again, who would have thought grass is bitter? But
Yeah.
yes, I agree.
So an interesting, so bitter element, but I would say primarily sweet. I don't think necessarily, I now said an intense sweetness, but I wouldn't say intense flavor. I feel like a watermelon is aptly named to water because it's extremely watery flavor.
Right.
Not necessarily that intense.
Which is an interesting thing because while you're explaining how you experience a watermelon, I've got a completely different experience in my mind. For me, biting into a nice, beautiful pink watermelon, the first thing I experience...
If I have to, it'll be red, like cherry Ferrari.
Yeah, but
red.
I mean as pink as possible in that sense. So yes, as red as possible. For me, that kind of classifies under the pink spectrum for my eyesight, in the sense where if I bite into that, I don't experience sweetness much. For me, probably on the taste profile, 3, maybe 4 out of 10 sweetness.
Okay.
But the texture, coconut-like. And I don't like...
terrible. What an association.
Right. So
I don't like coconut.
It's the only reason why I've never in my life really appreciated watermelon.
Interesting.
Because of that kind of texture. And the reason why is because I don't have anything against coconut. Coconut has just always given me heartburn. Like the microbes just kind of,
dislike it for a different reason.
Right. Yeah. Texture, I'm guessing.
No, flavor.
Oh, really?
I don't like that flavor.
That is so weird.
It ticks Bernice and her family off when I go there for dinner because they love coconut.
Oh, man, they just coconut everything. So for me, I've got that coconut type of texture, this dry, powdery, puffy type of element in my mouth. But then acidity-wise for me, it's almost in the direction of, the acidity that raspberries carry? Yeah. It's not really sour. It's kind of more of a sweet element. Yeah. But then you go and water it down with so much water that the sweetness starts disappearing.
Okay.
That's the acidity that I experience from a watermelon.
That's not a great association.
It's not a great association whatsoever.
I just want to make that for my palate.
But then the bitterness comes through.
Okay.
And I actually have a very, very big appreciation for the bitterness that is hidden inside of a watermelon. Okay. Because it's this watery, almost like fresh, freshly cut grass type of... So it's raining, and just as it stops raining, you go in and you cut the grass. That aroma that escapes has this freshness, bitterness to it. Okay. And I love that bitterness in watermelon.
Interesting.
Which is weird because I don't like the watermelon. Yeah. Now, of course, there's now other feelings that's associated with eating watermelon. That's an ishy palate and itchy eyes, and my palms start itching. And my
I have a spare fork in the car. You can scratch your eye with that.
You see, I can just stick it in there and just like wiggle around.
So it'll make for a good show.
And that's my issue with watermelon. Now, when we associate with the elements that we just gave forth in the watermelon in our mouth, it's not, it tastes like watermelon. No, we were going into the sweetness, into the acidity, into the bitterness, and into the feeling of the actual watermelon. Yeah. So in this coffee, when I take a little sip, especially now that it's cooled down, I actually love this thing cooled down slightly. Yeah. I've got this stingy, almost like in my face, sweetness that comes from a blueberry. Yeah. It's this sharp instant, and then it kind of just evaporates, like nothing left. But then it goes into the acidity, really carrying through that wininess, kind of pulling towards that citrus, but which is further back in the mouth. Yeah. And so my association with the grapefruit, the ruby grapefruit, is the bitterness element. That's like a 3 out of 10 bitterness. So when I say, I love that bitterness, I don't like the chocolatey, burnt, ashy, smoky, roasty.
Yeah, it's not like you're licking an ashtray. It's got that fruity element.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that most people get wrong when tasting something, going, I don't taste red apple in this coffee. Yeah. Well, it's because you're trying to taste red apple instead of looking of the sweetness of red apple, the acidity of red apple, and the bitterness finish of a red apple. And also that doesn't have a lot of bitterness finish.
An association that resembles that flavor. It's not like they added red apple to create the flavor. Right. It's the combination of the proteins and the sugars and the amino acids to give us a red apple-like element of flavor.
Exactly. which I think we should probably just go, not very deep, but just a little
Yeah.
bit into this. How does one create red apple flavor in a coffee? Well, through fermentation.
Yeah.
So our tongue consists of roughly about 10,000 taste receptors. Each taste
More or less.
receptor has this little wormy things that they call papillae. And the job of a papillae is to catch amino acids and associate those amino acids with something that you've experienced in the past.
Well, more technically, take the amino acid,
The Mr.
process,
Pedantic.
send the signal to the brain, and then the brain formulates. This is the most interesting part. The moment you get to the point where you argue, do you taste with your brain or with your tongue?
Exactly. Well, or do you taste with your tongue or your nose?
Yes.
Which is another association, which we're not going to go into that right now. But yes, the brain is experiencing these funky waves,
Yeah.
electrodes just going pop, 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 pop in your brain. And so it's not that you actually taste it, it's that your brain goes, I've tasted this before, here's a neuropath that I know, and I can associate, that tastes like ruby grapefruit.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, now that you see the sweetness, acidity, bitterness aspect that we look at, it is hopefully easier for you to now associate with the flavors that's actually written on the box.
Yeah, and I think, when a roaster can communicate that, or when you deal with a barista who tells you, listen, your coffee is going to have elements of this, and they can guide you through the sweetness, the acidity, and the bitterness elements, those flavor characteristics, but also the flavor notes, the specific flavor.
Right.
Saying, listen, you're going to have this sweetness. Then on the side of the tongue, you'll experience an acidity that feels like this and a bitterness that feels like this. So taking somebody on the journey of a flavor and
experience.
And we appreciate this because we don't always get the opportunity to find somebody who is so focused on their craft that they can take us that place, because this is now the thing. Explaining a flavor to somebody is like taking somebody on a hike, going on an adventure tour. If you haven't walked this route before, you can't take somebody there. So can you appreciate what you have in this cup enough to be able to explain it to somebody else? And there we deal with not often roasters, but I feel like a lot of baristas or espresso machine operators who don't love their own coffee.
Right, and there are a lot of them out there.
And I feel like the best place to start looking at buying a coffee that you can appreciate the flavor for is finding a barista who loves the coffee that he serves. Now, maybe their palate and yours is not the same. Maybe they like a bit of a more bitter or a more commercial element of flavor. But at least you start at a place where somebody has a love of this. You can appreciate their love of it. And there we start our journey of flavor.
Exactly. And then they'll take you down that path of understanding that element. And of course, if you're a client out there and you go to coffee shops for this experience, what you can also do is ask the roaster questions. Things like, so when you say narchi or when you say green apricot, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And let them describe it to you. Well, I experienced, I was young, I'm out in the backyard, and I see a yellow apricot. I run up to the tree, I grab it down, and of course, how do we eat an apricot? You kind of pull it open. And as he's pulling it open, he realizes that it's actually not ripe yet.
Slightly green, yeah.
It's still on the greener side, which means you can't pull it open. It's too hard. It's not ripe yet. So what do? You don't throw it away. You bite into it.
Yeah.
You ain't going to waste that thing. And all of a sudden, you've got this almost like a greenish apricot type of experience. What do you mean experience? Sweetness, acidity, bitterness. It's this numb sweetness, because there's not a lot of sweetness in that.
Very harsh and sharp acidity.
Very spunky, weird green grass acidity, but almost like a lime grass acidity, finishing off in not a bad bitterness, like a 2 out of 10 bitterness. That's the association of what his mind is connecting to when he says green apricot.
Yeah.
It's all down to the association. So don't go looking for blueberries or pink nectarine. Oh, well, pink nectarine. yellow nectarine.
Pink nectarine would be interesting.
Imagine that one. You know, or plums. Don't go and look for that specific flavor.
Yeah.
Go for the taste profile.
Yeah.
Look at the sweetness, the acidity, and the bitterness, and think of how you associate with those specific taste profiles.
Yeah. And also, I think, you know, challenging yourself to focus on the muscle that we have for tasting, because it's something that we're born with. This is something that we have the privilege to be born with, that you never think about until you're confronted with the reality that there is something beyond just what's in your cup or just what's on your plate, but that is so uniquely complex that we can't spend time on actually appreciating what is inside the cup.
Exactly.
And
not just the cup, the plate, you know, the bar, the whatever you eat or drink.
I mean, we do this even with food when we go out.
Every day.
And people find it very funny when I start looking at the menu and spending a lot of time on the meals, and then, you know, asking, like, why are you doing this? I said, well, I'm looking at what is the sweetness element,
Right.
what did they use for acidity, what did they use for bitterness, what's the umami component, and then what kind of textures and substance did they use? You know, did they use avocado for creaminess? Did they use tortilla chips for a crunchy element?
Yes.
What kind of sauce are they using?
Because that adds to the experience.
Yes, and which means now, because even though I don't know what it tastes like, I know my palate enjoys a creaminess if there's a little bit of an acidic kick to it with that crunchy sensation because it's stimulating.
Exactly.
Now I can look at a menu and I can go, oh, this looks good, this, I'm not 100% sure, let's try this. And 9 out of 10 times, nail it.
Right. And so he's never tasted the food before, yet he has an appreciation for the plate that's going to be made.
Yeah.
With sometimes an expectation.
Yes.
And sometimes the expectation disappoints because they didn't put enough creamy avocado into it according to what he thought he was going to taste. Now, I have the same issue. I mean, we just had the thing here.
Yeah.
I have this experience of this champagne-y type of acidity.
Yeah.
It doesn't make this champagne and it doesn't make this sparkly. There is, in actual fact, no sparkly in there.
Yeah.
Yet, it feels, the association has a comparison to the sparkliness,
Yeah.
if I could use that word.
Well, we'll use that anyway.
Right. So, I mean, hopefully that helps.
Yeah. I think with regards to flavor, I mean, there's a whole world out there of different flavors, things that we haven't experienced or experimented with or so on. But I think, you know, starting to ask yourself the question, what kind of flavors do you enjoy? Try something unique, you know, try a very nutty chocolate coffee, try an extremely berry-oriented flavor profile, try an extremely citrus-oriented flavor profile, and start experimenting. Even, yes, do something crazy. Taste them side by side. What? Blasphemy.
Who does that?
Who does that? But trying to find what can you enjoy in each cup, because that's going to lead you to a place where you can say, I enjoy these elements. I normally get them from an Ethiopian grown coffee or a Tanzanian grown coffee.
Right.
I know that this roaster roasts this kind of profile. This roaster goes for this kind of profile. And each of those experiments, each of those experiences then brings us to getting a cup and then finding our happy place in every single cup.
That brings us to the end of this topic and this episode.
Yeah.
Hope you guys that really enjoyed this. And of course, we want to say a huge thank you to
BergMedia ZA or BergMedia ZA.
BergMedia ZA for, this awesome setup. I'm sure you guys are noticing a crazy difference.
Yeah, the coffee industry's not booming this much.
Unfortunately.
Not yet.
So we just want to do a personal thanks to them. They are busy with some big plans in the future for themselves, so do go and check them out. Thank you guys for this awesome experience with this great, phenomenal sound and this awesome, beautiful view, of these cameras. And of course, the worst, but yet for them, best part, the editing to get
Yeah.
to you guys being able to actually enjoy and watching this.
Yep.
So there we go. Thank you, Mr. Pedantic.
Thank you, Mr. Theo
That was a
GLR.
phenomenal cup of coffee. I'm going to finish off that nice little last cold sip. See you guys
On the
on
next
the
episode.
next episode.